This is the brand new, fully redesigned 2019 Mercedes-Benz G-Class, and it is the coolest new SUV on sale. The G-Wagon first went on sale in the United States back in 2002, more than 15 years ago, and this is the first time that it's been redesigned since then. Today, I'm going to take you on a comprehensive tour of the new G-Wagon. I've borrowed this new G-Wagon from Fletcher Jones Motor Cars here in Newport Beach, California. Fletcher Jones is the largest Mercedes-Benz dealership in North America, and they always get the first, the best, and the coolest of everything. The new G-Wagon has just gone on sale, and it's no surprise that Fletcher Jones has one of the first models on dealership lots because they sell more G-Wagons than any dealership in North America. So what makes the G so cool? Well, there are a couple of factors that play a role in my opinion. One is the fact that this is the flagship SUV from Mercedes-Benz, so it's the most desirable vehicle from one of the most desirable luxury brands, and that's why it carries such a huge sticker price. These things start at around $125,000 before options, and options are plentiful. Then there is the celebrity factor. Just about every cool celebrity is driving around Hollywood in one of these looking cool. And so if you get one, then you could look cool also. There's also the boxy design, which everyone loves, and which they've kept largely unchanged from the previous model, even though this is a totally redesigned car. And then there are the G-Wagon's immense capabilities. This thing can basically go anywhere and do anything. It isn't just one of the most desirable luxury SUVs, but also one of the most capable off-road SUVs, which only adds to its allure. Anyway, about a year ago, I made a video where I complained bitterly about many of the problems and drawbacks and issues of the old G-Wagon, the outgoing model. So today I'm going to take you on a tour of this one, and I'm going to see if they've addressed my complaints, and if they have, how they've done it. And then I'm going to show you around the rest of the interesting quirks and cool features of the new G-Wagon. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'm going to give it a Doug score. And for more of my thoughts on the new G-Wagon, click the link below to visit autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've also rounded up a list of the most capable used luxury SUVs currently listed for sale on AutoTrader. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features by going through my complaints with the old G-Wagon to see if they've fixed them. And one of the biggest and most memorable complaints I had was the fact that even with the doors closed, you could look into the panel gaps and see the warning labels, which just looked unprofessional and terrible. This one they have addressed. The panel gaps are a lot smaller than they used to be, and when you look in there, you can't see the ugly warning labels. Another big complaint I had with the old G-Wagon related to the front turn signal and the front reflector. The turn signal I made fun of because it had these two screws in, and it just looked stupid. It looked like they just screwed it in right before you picked up the car. That one they've addressed also. They have taken the screws out, and the turn signal looks a lot more modern. Better is the reflector. Not only did I complain that it had stupid screws in it, but it looked like they had just tacked it on as an afterthought, which of course they had. Well, now the reflector no longer has the stupid screws, and it's been integrated into the side molding, which looks a lot better. Two more complaints addressed. I also complained about the rear reflector in the old G-Wagon. Once again, it had two stupid, ugly screws in it, and it looked like they had just stuck it on there as an afterthought. Once again, the rear reflector has been integrated into the side molding, the screws are gone, and it looks a lot better. But the majority of my complaints about the exterior of the old G-Wagon centered around the rear of the car, starting with the backup camera, which was just absurd. Mercedes-Benz had again tacked it on as an afterthought as the car evolved over 30 years of production, and they stuck it at the very top above the window, which not only looked stupid, but when you put the car in reverse, you saw a tire taking up like a third of your backup camera screen. It was just terrible. Mercedes-Benz has again fixed that complaint. The new backup camera is below the spare tire, where it should be, and it's hidden in place until you actually shift the car into reverse, at which point it pops out, and that preserves the look of the car when the backup camera is not on, instead of being just plunked up there, always looking stupid. And speaking of stuff that was just tacked on the old G-Wagon as an afterthought, I had a similar complaint about the rear wiper. When the G-Wagon first came out in the 70s as a military vehicle, they didn't need a rear wiper, but over time it became a luxury SUV, they had to add one, and it looked really ugly just sitting there in the middle of the back and the rear window. Once again, this is another complaint of mine that Mercedes-Benz has fixed. The rear wiper has been moved to behind the spare tire, meaning that you don't see it when you look at the back of the car. It's hidden there unless it's actually on, which makes the back of the car look a lot nicer. I also complained about two other items in the back that looked similarly stupid. One was the third brake light, which had been stuck inside the rear door, clearly to comply with regulations from 20 years ago, and then they just left it there looking stupid. Now the third brake light has been integrated into the whole design of the back of the car, and it looks a lot better right above the rear window. It looks like it's supposed to be there. Same thing for the rear washer. There's a rear window washer back here, and on the old ones, it was over on the side, and it was a very obvious, ugly thing. On the new G-Wagon, the rear washer still sticks out a little bit, but it's integrated into the third brake light housing, and it just generally looks a lot better than the old one, which was a little more obvious and in a little stranger of a place. Next up, moving on to the inside, another one of my complaints with the old G-Wagon was the crazy fun house mirror windows. They stuck straight up, and so they basically reflected whatever you were seeing on one side over on the other side. This time the windows have a little bit of arc to them, and so that terrifying aspect of the driving experience from the old G-Wagon has largely been removed from the new one, although you still get some reflections, but it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. Another big complaint I had with the outgoing G-Wagon was the interior packaging, which was just laughable. Because the design was so old, it was designed at a different time, cars were simply smaller, and the old G-Wagon was only 71.8 inches wide. The new one, even though it looks fairly similar to the old one, is 78 inches wide, and all of that extra width has translated to more interior room and more space for amenities. The best example of that is the cup holders. In the old one, they didn't have room for cup holders in the center console, and so they just stuck this ridiculous basketball hoop-looking cup holder in the passenger footwell. It was absurd and totally unbecoming a car that's this valuable. The new G-Wagon has two cup holders right in the middle, just like you'd expect from a normal car. And another big and welcome change is the parking brake. You no longer have a manual lever that you pull like a 1970s SUV that you're taking into the backwoods. Instead, this car has an automatic electronic parking brake that's over to the left of the steering wheel. And the benefit of this is obvious. Even if you don't like electronic parking brakes, it definitely frees up space in the middle of the interior where you can put stuff like cup holders, and where you can put the controls for the infotainment system, and just generally moving the parking brake allows you to give a little bit more hip room, leg room, knee room to the people sitting in the front. Another complaint I had with the old one is the fact that there was a warning label printed on the inside of the windshield telling you, I don't remember, not to do something or something. It looked really stupid. The point is, it's gone. The new one no longer has its beautiful interior broken up by an ugly warning labeled decal stuck to the inside of the front windshield. Another thing I thought was absolutely ridiculous in the outgoing G-Wagon was the rear cup holders. The only cup holders in the back seats were in this plastic flimsy piece that you could remove, and I referred to it as the single crappiest interior item in any $230,000 car when I reviewed the G65 last year. Fortunately, Mercedes-Benz has ditched that terrible flimsy cup holder piece. Instead, there are two cup holders in the center armrest, just like in most luxury cars, and they're reasonably nice enough, just like in most luxury cars. Other complaints of mine that Mercedes-Benz addressed regarding flimsy or crappy interior materials, the glove box in the old G-Wagon looked like the kind of thing you'd get in the 1970s era military vehicle that it was. It was plastic, you folded it down, and there were these crappy little cutouts for drinks where you would like put your canteen when you were out in battle. Finally, the glove box in the new G-Wagon is normal, and it looks like a glove box that you would get in a rational automobile. Another complaint I had centered around this piece of leather that Mercedes-Benz put above the steering column to shield you from the fact that the steering column went into the dashboard and actually controlled the wheels. Anyway, that stuff is all gone. Now the steering column meets the screens in a normal place, and they don't have to hide any inner workings with a little leather flap. Another complaint I had with the old G's interior was the blank switches, that you could spend 230 grand for the top of the line G65 I reviewed and still get blank switches in the middle. That stuff is also gone. Credit to Mercedes-Benz. No more center blank switches in this car. It looks like you checked every option box, and that makes you just feel a little better. Now, next up, I'm going to move on to some of my complaints with the old G-Wagon that Mercedes-Benz did not address or fix with the new one. And the most obvious is the exposed door hinges. Now, I talked in my old review about how the exposed door hinges don't need to be there, and I still think the car would look better if they were just flush and you couldn't see them. But when I complained about that in my old review, I got hundreds of comments from people saying the exposed hinges look cool, they make it look utilitarian and off-roadery, and they have to stay. And Mercedes-Benz focus groups must have told them the same thing, because even the new G-Wagon still has the exposed door hinges. Another feature that Mercedes-Benz didn't add to the G-Wagon, despite my complaints, is you still don't have keyless access. In basically every other luxury car, you can just walk right up to the car with the key in your pocket, tap the door handle, it unlocks, and then you get in. In the G-Wagon, you still have to take your key out of your pocket and press the unlock button. Although, the reason I'm told that they couldn't integrate keyless access is because of the door locks. This car has one of the great door latch sounds in the entire car industry, and it always has. They've preserved that. Take a listen. Now, apparently, in order to preserve that wonderful, satisfying click when you shut the doors of the G-Wagon, they couldn't integrate the keyless access system like in other Mercedes-Benz models, and so you had to have one or the other. And frankly, I would rather have the door click. They made the right choice. Another item I complained about in my review of the old G-Wagon was the rear door. It is massive, it is unwieldy, it is too heavy, and it is not power operated. In the new G-Wagon, the rear door is massive, unwieldy, too heavy, and not power operated. It seems that Mercedes-Benz wants the car to have this characteristic look in back, and the easiest way to do that is with this rear door and not an actual tailgate. And so this is what you get. They still can't figure out a way to make this power operated, so you still have the giant rear door. Back to the interior, a couple complaints they didn't address in here. One is the grab handle, which I think is just ridiculous, because people drive these around Beverly Hills and Newport Beach and Miami, and they don't need a grab handle for off-roading. But Mercedes-Benz didn't get rid of it. And I admit, this is an off-roader SUV still, and so for the 9 people who are gonna take it off-roading, a grab handle might be nice. Plus, it adds some credibility to its off-road capabilities, and so they kept the grab handle. I can cut them some slack for that. One thing I can't cut them some slack for, and that I still really don't like, is the placement of the power window switches on the driver's door panel. It's at the very top, directly next to the window, and so if you even lower the window a couple inches in a slight rainstorm with like a little mist, it's going to leak down onto your window switches, and that's annoying. Sometimes you want to have the window down when there's just a little bit of moisture, and with this car, you can't do it. It's bad placement, and they should have changed it. Finally, we move on to a complaint that I don't think Mercedes-Benz is ever going to be able to address, and that would be the fuel economy of this vehicle. Now, in my last video, I reviewed the top model of the old G-Wagon with a V12, and it got 11 miles per gallon city and 13 highway, okay? This is the new G-Wagon, the base model with the smallest engine, a V8, and it gets 13 city and 17 highway. There's just not all that much you can do when the car is as boxy and unaerodynamic as this vehicle is. Now, it's worth noting that the new G-Wagon uses the same engine as the outgoing model, which is a 4-liter turbocharged V8 that makes 416 horsepower. The difference is the transmission. The old one used a 7-speed automatic. The new one uses a 9-speed, which ideally would help a little bit with fuel economy, but it hasn't really seemed to do much. But anyway, that's basically all of the complaints I had with the old G-Wagon and all of Mercedes-Benz solutions, and frankly, they fixed almost everything I complained about. So anyway, moving on to the other quirks and features of the new G-Wagon, I want to start with the headlights. This is an easy way you can tell apart the new G from the old one. The old G had this LED light strip underneath the headlights. The new one ditches that for this modern looking circle around the headlights, which has a very nice look to it. And moving around back to the taillights, they've also been heavily modernized compared to the old G-Wagon. The old one's taillights were basically the same for years. They just kind of got updated here and there, but this one has an all-new taillight unit. It's larger than before, full LED. Strangely enough, when you put on the turn signal in the new one, it just lights up in red, the full taillight, rather than having like an orange portion of the turn signal like the old one and like most cars have. Next up, one other item I want to talk about on the outside of the G-Wagon before we move inside for those quirks and features. I want to talk about the general styling of this vehicle. You take a look at this thing and it looks like the old G-Wagon, which everybody loved. It just addresses a lot of the flaws of the old G-Wagon, which everybody hated. But they were able to modernize it and change all of those things without ruining the look of this car. They basically kept what people liked, the appearance, and ditched everything they didn't. This should be a model for automakers who are modernizing their iconic designs. Land Rover Defender, I'm looking at you. If Land Rover was smart at all, they would do exactly this with the new Defender. Keep the design everybody loves, but just change all of the terrible stuff that everybody hates. I don't think that is what Land Rover is gonna do with the new Defender, but Mercedes-Benz has masterfully pulled it off with the new G-Wagon, and I suspect they will have great success with this car as a result. Next up, we move on to the interior of the new G-Wagon, which of course has quite a few interesting quirks and features. Now, once you're inside and the door is closed, it isn't immediately obvious how to open it again. They've integrated the door handle pull into the door panel in a way that doesn't make it incredibly obvious, but you pull on this little silver thing and then you're out. Now, one interesting item, because Mercedes-Benz kept the old school door latches, you also have the old school door lock sound, which is incredibly loud. You press lock or unlock on the door and this beautiful button, and then you hear... That's got to be the loudest door lock sound in the industry, but people like that sound. Again, it makes them feel like they've just accomplished something by locking the doors. Way cooler than just an electronic lock in most modern cars. Another thing that I'm glad they kept from the old G-Wagon. Next up, moving on to the glove box. One interesting item in there is there are coin holders. A lot of cars have coin holders, but the G-Wagon has twice as many coin holders as I've ever seen in any other car, 2 rows of coin holders, which makes sense when you think about it, because G-Wagon owners have more coins than the rest of us. You know what I'm saying? Another interesting item in the interior. This car has your typical 3 locking differentials, just like always, better than basically any other car from the factory if you really want to go deep into the wilderness, and it has low range gearing. Now, in older cars, low range was like a lever you had to pull really hard. In this thing, it's just a little button next to the parking cameras. You press it and you're in low range, and then you can go a little further into the wilderness. Next, we move on to the back seat of the new G-Wagon, which has some improvements over the old one. Starting with the fact that in the old G-Wagon, I made fun of it because it didn't really have any climate controls. There was no screen back here. You were just kind of stuck with whatever air came out the center tunnel. Well, obviously, they've responded to that. Now there is a screen and climate controls. You can adjust the temperature and the airflow with these 2 little sliders. Simple enough, just like you'd expect in a luxury car at this price point. The back of the new G-Wagon has also been refined in other ways. For example, if you open this little compartment underneath the climate controls, you will see there is now a USB port, which adds some convenience for your rear passengers, and the child seat latches are a lot more available and visible than they were in the old one, so you can stick a child seat in the back of your G-Wagon. And next we move on to the cargo area of the new G-Wagon, which frankly is just like the cargo area in the old G-Wagon, nothing particularly special back here. And back up to the front of the new G-Wagon, where I want to talk technology for a minute. Now, the new G-Wagon is vastly improved on technology compared to its predecessor. It has way more features and equipment, but there are still a few disappointments. One is the fact still no panoramic sunroof in the G-Wagon. That one I don't understand. The car has a flat roof. how hard could it be to just make a giant sunroof on this thing? But for some reason, it's not available, or at least not yet. But the other technology in this car is fantastic. Now, I've already gone through this new Mercedes-Benz infotainment system in my review of the new E63 wagon, which I'll link below. I'm still going to cover a few of the highlights. One is the gauge cluster screen, which can be configured in a wide variety of different ways using the little touch pads on the steering wheel. The other screen is the center infotainment screen, which has a wide range of functions, starting with the navigation system. It's a massive navigation map, a huge screen. You can zoom in and out and see where you are and use it as a navigation system, since that's what it is. Now, like I said, I've already covered the main features of the infotainment system in the E63 review, but there are a couple of interesting quirks I noticed inside the infotainment screen, starting with sports alerts. Now, in most modern cars with SiriusXM satellite radio, you can set the radio to let you know when your favorite artist or your favorite song is playing, and it'll give you an alert letting you know. In this car, you can also set an alert to let you know when your favorite sports team is playing and when they're on some channel on XM radio, and it will give you an alert and let you know. And that's incredible. And if you go into the sports alerts, you can see you can choose between a wide variety of leagues. You have college football, college basketball, Major League Baseball, NHL, NFL, etc. You also have women's college basketball. So you can click on it, and then you are presented with an unbelievably long list of women's college basketball teams, and there are some rather interesting ones on this list. For example, Presbyterian is the Blue Hose. I went to Presbyterian. Oh yeah, what's their nickname? The Blue Hose. The Blue... what? Oh, the Blue Hose, like garden hose. Oh. Oh. Got it. Another interesting item in this car is that it gives you the ability to set the tone for the parking sensors. And as you do that, you can play yourself a nice little parking sensors tone song. Take a listen. Now, a lot of cars will let you play that little tone with the parking sensors, but one feature I especially like in the G-Wagon is it gives you a parking sensors early warning feature that you can turn on. Basically what this means is you can set it like a normal person. The parking sensors will go off at a normal distance, or if you're not very good at parking, you can set them to go off a little early. You know who you are, and I guarantee that you will turn on the early feature. And so that's a look around the new 2019 G-Class, which is a huge improvement over the old one, as you can see. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see if the driving experience is a huge improvement as well. Driving the new G-Wagon. Now, this is a pretty important thing. The old G-Wagon was, in fact, the oldest car on the market. It came out back in 2002. It came out in foreign countries even before that. And today, finally, we've moved on to the next generation. The first thing you notice the moment you get inside this car is that there's just dramatically more space than in the old one. Even though this car looks about the same size from the outside, the appearance is almost identical to the old one. They've actually widened everything, including the cabin. And so the interior, there's a lot more space. And the second thing you notice is just how much more modern it is inside this car than the old one. The old one, they did a great job of modernizing it and adding all the new tech, but you could tell where they just tacked on this and stuck in that, and you'd have a brand new infotainment controller next to a parking brake from the 70s. And now finally, by being able to do like a ground up redesign, everything is sort of where it should be. All right, first thing you notice, just going around a little corner, they've addressed the biggest complaint with my biggest complaint with the old one, which is the steering. In my opinion, the steering of the old G-Wagon was just a handful. You sort of turn it halfway and not much happened, then you turn it more and a lot happened, and it was just not linear and bad. The answer is it's dramatically improved, as you would hope and as you would expect. It's now as it should be. In terms of the solid kind of bank vault feel of the old car, it's definitely been modernized more than that. Part of that solid feel came from that steering that was kind of difficult and heavy. The steering is lightened, and so you don't quite have the same solidity. King of the road driving feel was one of the coolest things about the old G-Wagon, and that has been preserved. Just like with a lot of the stuff I showed you before, the good stuff has been kept and the bad stuff has been jettisoned. And so one of the greatest things about this car was the way you felt driving it. You felt like you owned the road. You're looking out over this, you could tell you're in this boxy Mercedes truck, like you're just the coolest person. And it still feels that way. And you still have the 3 diff lockers in the middle, so you know that if you want to, I could just make a turn and drive over whatever I wanted to. It is dramatically an improvement over the old one, which is great because it still looks like the old one, and everybody loved how the old one looked. But now finally it actually drives and feels like the type of luxury car that you would expect it to be, considering the price point. These things are going to get all over the place fast because finally you don't really have to make any compromises in order to have this car. You can now drive the G-Wagon and get the cool boxy styling on the ultimate Mercedes truck, and you actually get the technology and the driving feel and stuff of a Range Rover. And it's hard to argue against that. You know, a lot of people don't like this thing. Oh, the celebrities drive it, the Kardashians. Oh, it's all overkill, but it's the coolest truck. It just is. That's just kind of the reality of the G-Wagon. And finally now, it's like one of the nicest too. And so that's the 2019 Mercedes-Benz G550. I can't tell you how hard this review was to schedule because Fletcher Jones is selling these things as soon as they come in. Sometimes within a few hours of delivery to the dealership, they're just that hot. You may not like the G-Wagon because of its styling or because of its cost or because of its celebrity image, but it is the coolest new SUV on the market. And now it's time to give it a Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the G is gorgeous, and that's all there is to it, and it still looks great even with all the changes from before, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Acceleration does 0 to 60 in 5.6 seconds, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Handling is so vastly improved over the old one. It's still light and vague, but not horrible and dangerous like before, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Fun factor is higher than most luxury SUVs because it's so capable off-road if you actually want to use it there, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Cool factor is high, these still turn heads, and it gets a 6 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 26 out of 50. More important are the daily scores. Features, the G550 is shockingly well equipped, but with no keyless go, no panoramic sunroof, no power tailgate, and some other misses. It falls behind segment leaders like the new Lincoln Navigator and the latest Range Rover, and it only gets a 7 out of 10. Comfort is excellent, and I'm shocked to say this, but it's on par with the best in class, and it gets an 8 out of 10. Quality is good, the interior is nice, and aside from the occasional old school design feature and the usual Mercedes reliability concerns, it's excellent, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Practicality is excellent with lots of cargo space, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Finally, value. These have historically held their value tremendously well, but they're now way more expensive than before. I'm curious how depreciation will go, but for now, this one gets a 6 out of 10 for a total daily score of 37 out of 50. Added up, and the Doug score is 63 out of 100. And this is one of those cases where the Doug score is highly relevant because I've tested all the competition, and I'm just going to say it. The new G-Wagon is better than the new Range Rover. It used to be that you had to be image obsessed to buy the G-Wagon over the Range Rover, but now Mercedes actually makes the better SUV. The G-Wagon only loses to the ultra-expensive Bentley Bentayga and Rolls-Royce Cullinan, along with some performance SUVs that match the G-Wagon in the daily score and do predictably better in the weekend score. The new G is an excellent SUV.